Shalom is a profound word that appears in the Hebrew scriptures over 200 times, but its meaning goes far beyond the simple peace we usually associate with it. To understand the true essence of shalom, we must trace it back to its roots in ancient Hebrew. It comes from the verb shalom, which means to make complete, to restore, to return something to its original state. In its earliest appearances, shalom does not refer to the absence of conflict or calmness, but to a process of active and total restoration. The word shalom first appears in the Bible in the context of the laws given to the Israelites. In Exodus 21 and 22, for example, we find instructions on how to make restitution when harm or loss is caused. If someone destroys another's property, they must shalom, that is, make full restitution and restore what has been lost. This concept of shalom is not related to internal well-being or inner peace, but to the repair of what has been broken or taken away. This act of restoring is not limited to the material. In the deepest biblical sense, shalom implies the process of returning wholeness and order where there was once chaos or damage. The peace that shalom represents is much more than the absence of war. It is the presence of everything that should be in its place, a total restoration of what has been lost. In this context, we can see that peace, or shalom in the Bible, becomes an act of justice and repair. But what does this mean for us today? If shalom is a complete restoration, how can we see this restoration in our own lives and in the world around us? Throughout the Bible, the concept of shalom becomes a vision of what should be, a state in which everything, from our relationships to the physical world, is complete and in balance. And this is not just a promise for the future, but a reality that can begin to be lived here and now. Can we imagine a world where everything that is broken is restored? A world in which shalom is lived not only in our relationships, but also in the restoration of nature, in the peace of our cities, and of course, in our hearts. This is the profound calling that shalom invites us to experience, to restore what has been damaged, to return peace and wholeness to what is broken. Now that we have explored the meaning and origin of shalom, let's move on to see how this word develops throughout biblical history. The concept of shalom not only appears in the laws of restitution, but it also becomes a divine promise throughout the history of Israel. As we move forward in the biblical narrative, we can see how shalom is presented as a vision of restoration that God has for his people. This word is used significantly in times of suffering and longing for peace, as a promise that suffering will not be eternal and that the complete restoration of peace is yet to come. The prophets of Israel, such as Jeremiah and Isaiah, used shalom in powerful ways to convey the hope of a restored future. For example, in the book of Jeremiah, the prophet gives us a vision of shalom in the midst of exile and despair. God promises the Israelites that even though they find themselves in a foreign land, their future will be restored and peace will be restored in their lives. God's well-known promise in Jeremiah 29:11 is an affirmation of shalom. For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Here, shalom is presented not just as peace, but as a promise of well-being, of comprehensive restoration for his people. Isaiah also takes us further by describing the arrival of a special ruler, the Messiah, who will be known as Sar Shalom, the Prince of Peace. This title is crucial because in Hebrew culture, a prince was not just a symbolic figure, but someone with authority. Therefore, Sar Shalom is not simply someone who brings peace, but someone whose rule produces shalom, who restores the entirety of creation. This is the leader who will bring the restoration of everything that is broken, and his rule will not be temporary or limited, but will last forever. This message is as relevant today as it was for the ancient Israelites. The promise of shalom is not a simple declaration of peace, but the restoration of everything that has been fractured in our lives. The vision of a future where all relationships, both with God and with others and with the world, are complete, where chaos is transformed into order, is the vision of biblical shalom. But shalom is not just a future promise. It is an active invitation to be part of the restoration process here and now. So if shalom is the promise of a restorative peace, how can we begin to live out this restoration in our day-to-day lives? How can we embrace shalom in our relationships, in our communities, and in our own lives. The invitation is clear. To live out shalom is to allow God to work in the broken areas of our lives, seeking to restore what is damaged, just as he did with the people of Israel. Now, looking through the prophets, we see that shalom is not just a promise for one people, but a calling for everyone. This is where the fulfillment of this promise through Christ comes in. Let's explore how Jesus is the embodiment of shalom, fulfilling this vision of complete peace and restoration. In the New Testament, the promise of shalom reaches its perfect fulfillment in the person of Jesus Christ. He not only brings shalom, but he embodies it. Throughout the Gospels, we can see how Jesus' words and actions bring restoration, healing, and complete peace to people. Jesus is described as Sar Shalom, the Prince of Peace, who not only offers peace as an abstract concept, but brings the tangible and restorative peace of God into people's lives. In the Gospel of Mark, we find a stunning example of how Jesus brings shalom to someone in a desperate situation. A woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years, finding neither cure nor relief, approaches Jesus seeking healing. When she touches his cloak, she is instantly healed. Jesus, realizing what had happened, turns to her and says, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace. Go in shalom." Mark 5:34. In this moment, she is given not only physical healing, but also emotional and social restoration. Her isolation and suffering come to an end, and the peace Jesus offers is not just the disappearance of her illness, but the complete restoration of her well-being. This act of healing is not isolated. Throughout the Gospels, we see how Jesus restores what was broken. He calms the storm with a single word, peace, demonstrating his authority over nature itself. Mark 4:39. Through his miracles and teachings, Jesus demonstrates that shalom is not simply the absence of conflict or illness, but the presence of the total restoration of all things, body, soul, and spirit. In John 14:27, Jesus says, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid." Here, shalom is described as something only Jesus can give, a kind of peace that transcends any circumstance. The peace he offers does not depend on the absence of problems, but on a profound restoration that comes from being in communion with him. Shalom is therefore a state of comprehensive well-being, not just something experienced when circumstances are favorable. But Jesus' work of shalom does not end with his miracles or teachings. His sacrifice on the cross is the culmination of the restoration that shalom promises. By dying for our sins and rising again, Jesus offers the ultimate peace, a peace that brings reconciliation, not only among humans, but between human beings and God. Colossians 1:20 tells us that, through him, Jesus Christ, to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. This is the perfect fulfillment of shalom, the restoration of everything that was broken, the healing of the divide between God and humanity, and the reconciliation of all things. Jesus' sacrifice not only restores the relationship between God and human beings, but it also establishes a path for the restoration of everything that is broken in the world. Through his death and resurrection, shalom is not just a theoretical concept or a future promise, it is a reality we can experience now. The peace of Christ is a living, active peace that is unaffected by the circumstances of the world, but brings with it a profound restoration in all aspects of human life. Throughout Paul's writings, we see that Jesus is described not only as the bearer of shalom, but as shalom himself. In Ephesians 2:14, Paul writes, "For he himself is our peace, who has made the two groups one and has destroyed the barrier, the dividing wall of hostility." Christ not only brings peace, but he himself is peace, breaking down the barriers that separate us from God and from one another. This is the shalom offered to everyone, regardless of their history, culture, or circumstances. The shalom that Christ brings is not a simple cessation of hostilities, but the complete restoration of the relationship with God and with others. It is the peace that comes from reconciliation, from deep healing, and from the restoration of everything that is broken. The restoration that shalom represents is not limited to a future promise or a distant spiritual reality. Jesus, by embodying shalom, invites us to live out that restorative peace in our daily lives. Shalom is not just a peace experienced in the heart, but it must be a peace actively lived out in our relationships, in our communities, and in our daily struggles. The shalom of Jesus calls us to be agents of restoration in the world. The peace he offers us is not a selfish gift to be enjoyed alone. It is a gift we must share. In Matthew 5:9, Jesus says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." This beatitude does not refer only to those who keep the peace by avoiding conflict, but to those who, like Jesus, actively work to restore what is broken. Peacemakers are those who seek reconciliation between people, between nations, and, above all, between humanity and God. But how can we be peacemakers in such a broken world? The answer is found in the way Jesus lived and taught. He did not avoid conflicts, but he addressed them with the goal of restoring. Take, for example, his relationship with the marginalized and excluded of society. Jesus extended shalom to lepers, women, sinners, and foreigners, restoring their dignity and their relationship with God and with others. In this way, Jesus shows us that shalom is an inclusive process that breaks down the barriers of exclusion and restores unity among people. Shalom also extends to creation itself. In the beginning, God created the world, and everything in it was good, complete, and in harmony. But sin brought disorder and brokenness, not only among human beings, but also with nature. However, through the redemptive work of Christ, creation is also being restored. In Romans 8:21, Paul tells us that the creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into the freedom and glory of the children of God. This means that the Shalom Christ brings also has ecological implications, inviting us to care for and restore the world God created. The call to live out Shalom is not limited to a personal or social aspect, but it also involves inner peace. Living in Shalom implies being at peace with ourselves, with our past, our imperfections, and our internal struggles. Jesus offers us the inner peace that transcends the problems we face. As mentioned in Philippians 4:7, the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. This peace is not just a momentary feeling of calm, but a deep assurance that, even if circumstances change, our identity in Christ remains intact. Shalom also has a transforming power in our communities. When believers live in Shalom, the church becomes a place of restoration, not only for individuals, but also for relationships and social structures. The peace of Christ must be a guiding principle in all our interactions, from family relationships to work and community relationships. By being peacemakers, we can positively influence our surroundings, working to heal social wounds and creating a space where everyone can experience restoration and reconciliation. The invitation of Shalom is not just an invitation to wait for God's peace in the future, but to work to bring that peace into the present. Every act of reconciliation, every effort to restore what is broken and heal what is shattered is a manifestation of Shalom in action. Thus, living in Shalom is a calling not only to experience the peace of Christ in our lives, but also to be his instruments in the restoration of the world around us. Throughout the scriptures, Shalom is not only presented as a partial or temporary restoration, but as a definitive promise of the restoration of all creation. This complete peace is what God promises us in the New Jerusalem, the city where everything will be restored and there will be no more suffering or pain. The last book of the Bible, Revelation, gives us a clear vision of what Shalom will be like when it is fulfilled in its entirety. In Revelation 21:3-4, the final state of humanity is described to us, when God will dwell with his people and everything that is broken will be restored. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away." This passage is a description of complete Shalom, the restoration of everything that was damaged by sin and corruption. The peace that Christ purchased with his sacrifice is the one that will be lived in its fullness in the new creation. The restoration promised in Revelation is not a mere elimination of difficulties, but a complete renewal of human life. Eternal shalom is a state of well-being and wholeness, where everything that was broken will be restored to its original perfection. This is the shalom that every believer hopes for, a peace that transcends suffering and death, and that is found in the eternal presence of God. But this shalom is not just a future vision. The promise of the New Jerusalem is a hope that is already beginning to impact our reality today. As we live out shalom in our lives, we also prepare ourselves for this definitive restoration. By following the path of Jesus and living in shalom, we are anticipating the future where everything will be restored and where pain and death will finally be defeated. Every act of love, every effort to heal what is broken and restore what is lost, is a foretaste of that final promise of shalom. The reality of this complete restoration may seem distant, but the hope of shalom gives us the strength to keep moving forward, to work for peace today, with the certainty that in the future, everything will be restored. Jesus is the beginning and the end of that restoration. He has already conquered death and suffering, and through him, we can experience today a portion of that peace that will be ours in its entirety in the future. Therefore, shalom is not just something we must wait for, but something we can begin to live out in our lives. Through the work of Christ, the eternal peace we hope for is already present, and we are called to live it every day, being peacemakers and restorers in this broken world. To the extent that we live out shalom, we join in God's work of restoring everything that is broken, and we anticipate the day when that restoration will be complete. Shalom is not just an abstract idea or a distant hope for the future. The true beauty of shalom is that it can be experienced and lived in the present, right here and now. In our day-to-day lives, God's restorative peace can transform our relationships, our work, our internal struggles, and, ultimately, the world around us. The invitation to live in shalom is both a challenge and a promise, a calling to be agents of restoration in a broken world. First, living out shalom in our relationships. One of the clearest areas where we can apply shalom is in the reconciliation and restoration of our personal relationships. Whether in marriage, with friends, with family members, or even with those with whom we have disagreements, shalom calls us to be peacemakers. As followers of Christ, we have the responsibility to heal divisions, to mend what is broken, and to build relationships that reflect the peace and restoration that Christ offers us. Jesus himself taught that peace is not just a state of tranquility, but an active restoration of what is broken. This means forgiving others, asking for forgiveness when we have failed, and seeking unity even in the midst of differences. In Matthew 5:9, Jesus says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." This call to peacemaking is more than simply avoiding conflict. It is about being intentional in creating an environment where reconciliation and forgiveness are a constant practice. By living this way, we show the world God's love and make shalom visible in our lives. Living out shalom in our inner peace is also crucial. As human beings, we all face internal struggles, fears, insecurities, and emotional conflicts. But God's shalom does not only affect our external relationships, it also affects our inner peace. Jesus invites us to rest in him, to find our peace in him, not in the circumstances that surround us. In John 14:27, Jesus says, "Peace I leave with you. My peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled and do not be afraid." The peace that Christ offers us is a peace that goes beyond what the world can give. It is a peace that brings healing, rest, and a deep calm that does not depend on external circumstances. To live out shalom in our inner peace, we must learn to lean completely on God, trusting that he is in control of our lives even when everything around us seems chaotic. This inner peace is not something we can achieve by our own strength, but rather it is a gift from God that we must receive and live out day by day. Finally, living out shalom in the world around us. As followers of Christ, our mission is to be agents of restoration in the world. Shalom is not just a peace for ourselves, but a peace that we must share with others. This applies to small, everyday interactions, as well as to major social and global challenges. From social justice, environmental care, and racial reconciliation, to small acts of kindness in our communities, every act of restoration reflects God's shalom in action. Jesus himself spent his life healing the sick, helping the poor and marginalized, and working to restore what was broken in society. In the same way, we are called to be instruments of that restoration, bringing shalom to the darkest corners of the world. This involves fighting for justice, being advocates for the oppressed, and working for a world where everyone can experience the peace and restoration that only God can offer. Shalom is, therefore, a mission and a calling that transcends our individual lives. It is the work of restoring the world and everything in it to God's original perfection. Every time we choose to live in peace with others, every time we forgive, every time we work for justice or help those in need, we are participating in the restoration of all that is broken. Conclusion: Shalom is much more than a temporary or superficial peace. It is the complete restoration of everything that was broken by sin. Through the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, Shalom has been brought into the world, not as a mere future promise, but as a reality that we can already experience. Living in Shalom is a call to restore what is broken, to heal what is shattered, and to live in peace with God, with others, and with the world. So how can we embrace this complete peace in our lives? What areas of our lives need restoration? God's Shalom is available to you today, and he invites you to live in the restoration of all that is broken. Live in Shalom, not just as an abstract concept, but as an active reality that transforms your life and the world around you.